The hero of Motherless Brooklyn is this character Lionel Esrog, who's an orphaned kid from Brooklyn who's really kind of grown up on the mean streets of Brooklyn and who is afflicted with Tourette's syndrome and obsessive compulsive disorder, and yet is extremely bright, has a very powerful mind, has a powerful memory, and a powerful ability to focus. You know, the positive side of his obsessive personality is that he holds information, as he says, like glass in the brain, and is in a way to people. He presents himself as a kind of a freak show, which is what people call him. Even his friends call him that. But he quietly has real talents and skills that flow from his affliction. The story is essentially about an underdog outsider who is afflicted, a guy who's afflicted with Tourette's syndrome and obsessive compulsive disorder, and who works for a New York private eye in the late 50s in New York. And it's a murder mystery because it's about when his boss is killed in a dark and sort of mysterious meeting. This character, Lionel, has to sort of set off to try to figure out who killed his only friend and why. And in the course of doing it, he uncovers a very grand corruption. This is a very unorthodox thing to propose to an author of a novel, but thankfully, Jonathan Letham's like, he's as passionate a student of New York as I am, and he really, I think, I couldn't have been luckier in the sense that he authentically loved the idea of the hero that he had created being serialized into another story, almost like Mickey Spillane, you know, like Mike Hammer or Sam Spade or any of these detectives that people wrote lots of stories about. And that's kind of how we talked about it. It's like let's take Lionel and send him off into his next detective adventure. So it was a strange thing to do because it meant I was taking Jonathan's character and some of the ideas that drove the book and transplanting them into an original story that was totally of my own making. Directing a movie is almost, by definition, antagonistic to the state of mind you want to be in as an actor. It just is. You want to be out of your head when you're acting, and you got to have your head on top of everything when you're directing. So you're doing something that's antagonistic to what I associate with the best work, acting. And that means, A, you got to really own that character long before you ever step into doing it. And it also means that if you're going to have any hope of focusing as an actor, your preparation as a director's got to be just like we used to. The whole time we were doing this, we would say, like the Dirty Dozen, you know, Donald Duck goes here. And that, you know, you have to have it like, you got to have a game plan that is just moves like a machine, where your collaborators don't need answers from you on the day as much as possible. Like where everybody knows when we show up, this is what we're doing. We've thought it through. We've asked the questions. We all know what to do, and now we got to execute. And that way you can carve a little bit of space for yourself, you know, to be an actor. When I sent it to him, Alec, he wrote me when he was in the middle of reading it. He said, like, I feel my inner Lee J. Cobb coming out, which is a very like inside baseball actor's reference. But Lee J. Cobb, you know, if you watch like On the Waterfront, he's Johnny Friendly in On the Waterfront, 12 Angry Men. When he said that, I just went, oh my God! Like if he gets in, if that's where he locates this, if he gets into that gear, he's going to be an animal in this, and he was. Like I think. You know, there's a monologue. He has a monologue in the film toward the end that I sort of assumed no one would be able to get through. I assumed I'd have to cut it down, and he came to it like a great Shakespearean actor. He drove through it. He makes such sense of it. It's so fantastic. Like I don't like watching things I've done over and over again. I will never get tired of watching him do this monologue in the end. when I was talking about like people who are just stone cold pros, like Gugu is that very best thing. I mean, she's like a true thoroughbred. She can just turn on a dime. She is so facile and so gifted. She makes it extremely easy for someone like me who's wearing too many hats and having, in some cases, uncomfortably feeling the need to pivot in a given moment. If you're working with an actress, especially in the kind of intimate scenes that we had to do, who's thrown by their scene partner in these intimate scenes sort of breaking out and also being their director, you're toast. I mean, you're just absolute toast. And she was like my MVP. To me, Willem's just gotten like even more and more and more interesting and compelling as an actor, and I've been lucky to get to know him through working on the movies with Wes. And I thought, like, the character he plays is really the moral center of the movie. He seems like a crank in the beginning, and the further it goes, you realize he's actually Obi-Wan Kenobi. He's the man in rags in the desert who is actually a Jedi Knight, and actually is like the most moral person in the film. And to me, he has that. He has the ability to straddle that thing where you might think he's a schizophrenic or a homeless person or whatever, and in truth, he's kind of like the one. And so it's like, to me, like the guy who played like Bobby Peru and Jesus is kind of perfect for that. And so again, I was just like super lucky. She came up in New York theater in my era, like Cherry Jones is like, she's one of the bright lights on Broadway. I mean, really, like the heiress and Doubt, so many. I mean, you can't even really name all the great like theater performances Cherry's given. And her character is sort of, I call her like the hardcore old unrepentant Bronx socialist. You know what I mean? And I think that she's tough as nails, and she just has all that. Like if you saw Cherry in the Shanley play Doubt, it's like as the hard-ass nun, it's like, I'll take that. Like just that. You don't even have to do anything different. Just like, let's take you out of the nun's outfit, put you in like a a crusading reformers tweed dress, and it'll be great. And it is. Like, she's great. I worked with Dick Pope on The Illusionist back in like 2005, and he was in my pantheon of the greatest living cinematographers at that time because of Vera Drake, Topsy Turvy, all the films with Mike Leigh, which ranged from like the grittiest, like Naked and those improvisational films that he made with Mike, to the most lustrous and luscious period films like Topsy Turvy, and everything he did, I would look at it and just go, what is that guy doing? I loved it. And when we worked on The Illusionist, I was just like blown away by him. We recreated the old Penn Station, and I'm really proud of what we pulled off. Beth, our incredible visual effects supervisor, Mark Russell. I've had many people asking me, did you guys find that in Budapest? Did you find it in things? And they don't know that we recreated Penn Station in a gigantic hangar out on Long Island. And I think Jim Cameron wasn't really even able to parse, when I showed it to him, how much was built and how much was in the effects world and stuff like that. Because, we took this, one of the great destroyed architectural masterpieces of America, and brought it back to life, and I'm pretty proud of that. We knew we wanted Laura and Lionel to dance in this club, and we were kind of like, well, what song of that era would be right? And then, just kind of on an off notion, I said to Wynton, like, well, what if you did a sort of a late 50s Miles Davis ballad style arrangement of Tom's song? And he did that, and I played it for Tom, and Tom just like almost lost it. He was like, that's just the best thing I've ever heard. And so what's really beautiful about Tom's song is it's in the film, sort of voiced by him. And we went through this thing of like, should we have it sung by someone else? And ultimately, I just thought that Tom's voice is so. I felt it was the perfect like voice for Lionel in a way, and then it returns sort of in the tissue of the period in its jazz incarnation, and I love it. I think it's it was funny when Wynton heard it. He kind of listened to it and he like took the headphones off and he was like, "That's a straight up standard." When we got into writing the score with Daniel Pemberton, who is himself kind of a protean genius, we started just realizing like we were going to write this very classical jazz score, this like with real melodies and real set pieces. And Daniel said, "Well, Jesus, like I know we can't get Wynton to play the trumpet for the whole score." And I was like, "Well, why don't we ask him?" And so it grew and evolved, and ultimately Wynton played all of the trumpet solo through the whole orchestral score, the whole jazz orchestra score. And I mean, that's just like, that's like having like Ted Williams come in and pinch hit for you. It's like he brought such a incredible, his tone on the instrument is so beautiful, and it is literally the musical stand-in for Lionel's inner life, and now I watch it, it gets me every time because it's so melancholy. It has such a lonely, melancholy tone, and I think Daniel Pemberton wrote some like incredibly memorable themes, but getting Wynton on them was just the most incredible blessing. In that era, you had some of the most exciting, hard bop, like giving way to what Miles Davis was doing with Birth of the Cool, and modal jazz a little bit after that, and all of that. That, like, to me, if there is a musical expression of the improvisational, wild, delightful quality that can come out through Tourette's, it's jazz, and especially, kind of hard bop. So I loved the idea of Lionel finding his way into that world and being set off by the music, because in a way the music is like him, and seeing him get sort of liberated by the music, so in a way that he isn't forced to suppress what's often trying to come out of him. I was always fascinated by specifically some of the things that happened in New York in the 50s in particular. But there's so many, you hear about the famous names in New York: LaGuardia, Al Smith, the great Tammany governor of New York, LaGuardia, the famous mayor, Nelson Rockefeller, and there's kind of the history of the known people who were the leaders, but there's this incredible secret history to New York as well, who the power bosses were, who were the real people who pulled the strings, who were the Darth Vaders behind it all. And the more you learn about New York, and you learn about sort of like how the sausage really got made, in a way, you just realize that most New Yorkers and most Americans, in a lot of ways, we float on kind of this one narrative about how things got to be the way they are. And when you find these things out, you realize like how the old city got converted into the modern city is a really deep and dark story. And I felt that what Lionel and Motherless Brooklyn represented was this great vehicle for going into these things that I wanted to go into. People don't get to shoot in the main reading room of the New York Public Library. We found this pool in Harlem that everybody has said to us, where the hell is that? And there's some of these really featured places. But I like, to me, New York has these experiences when you live there of places that imprint, and we we shot our own neighborhood. Me and Willem and Bill and my producer, we all live in the village, and we used the village in some ways that were really fun for us, because we lit parts of our part of the town that are very notable, like Washington Square Park. But we also, we did shots of Alec Baldwin and Willem Dafoe confronting each other under an awning that are based on certain photographs that I loved, where there's dark, and we figured out how to shut all the lights off on Fifth Avenue and make a deep pool of darkness to create certain effects of light that I think we're all pretty proud of. You can't really be interested in New York and not encounter Robert Moses down whatever vector you look. So yes, and obviously a lot of the macro history is the history of what happened, that was driven by him. But there's also a large dimension of the deeper secrets in the film and what it's really about on a psychosexual level, without giving too much away, that is very specifically, in my mind, drawn from other figures that I think were personified, kind of what I would call the gross hypocrisies of racism. It's a really, 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 really well-produced film, and I think this group was definitely like a 1 + 1 + 1 = way more than 4 kind of. My partners in it all had really fantastic experience sets. To get a group together that, again, was really just stone cold professionals who really each individually do the work of double or triple. This was just a production with a scale of complexity that was not going to get pulled off without a group that could chop up the very, very, very heavy demands of it and pull it off. So I feel like we were the Justice League. It was the Justice League of producers. People go to the same friggin' costume warehouses. They just do. It's why you see stuff and it looks the same. And Amy has access in ways we will not disclose, but she has access to stuff that's not available because she comes from this lineage of great costume designers. And we got the private warehouse, and you can tell, I think, when you look at the film, it's really beautiful. But she has a great sense of character. I think Lionel kind of goes from being one way, he kind of evolves, and she really worked with me on as he steps more and more into his boss's shoes, how does he literally start to how do we track across the film the degree to which he's literally stepping into the coat of his mentor. And I think it's really neat. It's subtle, but by the end you sort of realize that he has become his mentor, and it's even expressed in the clothes, which I loved. Paul Shu, I gave him a very specific mandate that I think he got very excited about, which was that in combo with the music, I wanted the soundscape of the film to have a very modern edge, where you have a period sensibility, but you have something cutting through it, a modernism cutting through it that sort of makes it more emotionally visceral. And I really wanted to create, because of Lionel's brain and our intention to depict at times, cinematically depict the way his brain works. I knew I wanted to have soundscapes and tropes that were not naturalistic. That's fun. That's a lot of trial and error, but sometimes what I love about someone like Paul is our reference points were very similar. You're able to communicate about films you love. You're able to draw on certain references, and then he goes out and God knows where they find or create a lot of the source of what they find, but it was wonderful. Mark Russell, I had never worked with. He was one of the best visual effects. His taste, his sense of how to get what I was going for phenomenal. And Joe Klotz is like, he's Academy Award nominated, New York based, Brooklyn based editor, and he's just a great guy. Editing, in addition to the chops, you really just want someone that you can stand to be in a room with for that much time. And Joe is such a gentleman and patient, great work ethic. I mean, your editor really needs to be your steady hand, like a person who's just like willing to execute fast on any idea and then bring around a point of view like when you're ready for it, and I can't say enough good about Joe or Mark